There are places in the world where the air itself feels heavy with memory, where the sea carries whispers of a past too vast to be fully grasped. Rhodes, the sun-washed island in the southeastern Aegean, is one such place. Today, visitors stroll along its harbors, sip coffee in shaded squares, and gaze at the same horizon that once bore witness to one of humanity's most audacious creations, the Colossus of Rhodes. More than 2 millennia ago, this island stood at the height of its power, a maritime hub, a cultural crossroads, and a political player in the turbulent world of the Hellenistic kingdoms. In that golden age, Rhodes dared to declare itself not just prosperous, but invincible. And to seal that declaration, they raised a giant. The Colossus was no ordinary statue. Standing over 30 meters tall, taller than the modern Statue of Liberty without its pedestal, it was a vision of the sun god Helios, wrought from bronze and iron, dominating the harbor's entrance. It was a feat of engineering so bold that even in an age of architectural wonders, it ranked among the greatest. For the Rhodians, it was not just art, nor mere propaganda. It was a promise carved in metal, a statement that their city would endure against siege, storm, and the grinding forces of history. Yet history, as it always does, had other plans. Barely half a century after its completion, an earthquake shook Rhodes to its foundations. The Colossus, which had weathered political storms and literal sieges, crumbled. Ancient accounts tell us the giant lay where it fell for centuries, its fractured limbs still awe-inspiring to travelers who came to marvel at the ruin. The people of Rhodes never rebuilt it, whether out of financial exhaustion, respect for an oracle's warning, or a shifting political reality, we cannot say for certain. The remains were eventually sold for scrap in the 7th century CE, disappearing into history's void. All that is left are scattered descriptions, half-truths, and legends that have been polished by centuries of retelling. Today, the Colossus exists only in our collective imagination. Artists have painted it straddling the harbor, though historians doubt this was ever true. Writers have turned it into a symbol of defiance and endurance. Archaeologists search for traces of its foundations. Engineers run calculations of its weight and stability, and dreamers imagine its return. And so we arrive at the question that has teased both scholars and visionaries. Could we rebuild the Colossus of Rhodes with modern technology? Could we, with our cranes and alloys, our computer modeling and seismic reinforcements, restore one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, not as a ruin, but as a living presence beside the harbor it once guarded? To answer this question is to navigate not only the realm of engineering, but also that of culture, politics, and meaning. Rebuilding the Colossus would not simply be a matter of reassembling bronze plates over an iron skeleton. It would be a statement to the world. It would force us to decide whether such a work should replicate the original as faithfully as possible or reimagine it as a monument to the modern age. It would ask us to weigh the risks, financial, environmental, cultural, against the potential rewards, the revival of a wonder, the transformation of a city, the rekindling of a dream. This journey will take us into the heart of the ancient Mediterranean, where merchants and war fleets crossed paths, where art and politics were inseparable, and where the Rhodians once forged a god from molten metal. It will lead us through the dust of fallen empires and into the laboratories of modern engineers, where structural analysis meets historical detective work. Along the way, we will meet not only the Colossus as it was, but the Colossus as it might be. Taller, stronger, more enduring than the one that fell, yet carrying the same timeless spirit of ambition. The Colossus of Rhodes was, in its time, a statement that humans could challenge the scale of the gods. To rebuild it now would be to make that statement again, in a different language, but with the same audacity. Whether such an undertaking would be a triumph of cultural revival or a folly of monumental proportions remains to be seen. But one truth is certain. The harbor of Rhodes has stood empty of its guardian for over 2,000 years, and the sea still waits for the day when a giant might once again rise to meet the sun. In the late 4th century BCE, the Aegean world was a restless sea of power and ambition. Alexander the Great's empire, once a force that spanned from Greece to the Indus, had shattered after his death in 323 BCE, leaving his generals, the Diadochi, to carve it into competing kingdoms. In this new world order, cities rose and fell not just through military might, but through their mastery of trade, diplomacy, and strategic alliances. Rhodes, a sunlit island off the coast of Asia Minor, found itself uniquely positioned to thrive in this turbulent age. Geographically, Rhodes was a jewel. Its location placed it at the crossroads of Mediterranean trade routes, connecting Greece, Egypt, the Levant, and Asia Minor. Ships laden with grain from the Nile, spices from Arabia, and fine pottery from Athens passed through its harbors. But Rhodes was more than a mere port. It was a city-state with a proud naval tradition, a skilled merchant class, and a political system that valued both autonomy and alliance. The city's prosperity was built on its ability to navigate the shifting currents of geopolitics as deftly as its sailors navigated the open sea. By the time the Colossus was conceived, Rhodes had already proven itself militarily. In 305 BCE, the island faced one of its greatest challenges when Demetrius I of Macedon, known as Poliorcetes, the besieger, laid siege to the city with an army and a fleet. The siege was not just a test of strength, but of endurance. Demetrius brought with him some of the most advanced siege engines of the era, including the famed Helepolis, a massive siege tower bristling with catapults. For a year, the Rhodians resisted, using their own engineering ingenuity to repel the invaders. Eventually, diplomacy and shifting alliances forced Demetrius to withdraw, leaving behind much of his war equipment. It was from the spoils of this failed siege that the idea for the Colossus took root. According to ancient sources, the Rhodians sold the abandoned siege engines for a staggering sum and decided to use the money to erect a monument worthy of their victory and their patron deity, Helios. This was no mere act of commemoration. It was a declaration of identity. For the Rhodians, Helios was not only the god of the sun, but also a protector and symbol of their independence. By raising his image to the scale of a god among men, they were sending a message to the Hellenistic world. Rhodes was not to be trifled with. The decision to build such a statue must be understood in the broader cultural context of the Hellenistic age. This was a period marked by monumentalism. Across the Mediterranean and Near East, rulers and cities competed in building projects that were as much about prestige as function. The Lighthouse of Alexandria rose to guide ships into the Nile Delta. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus stood as a towering tomb to a satrap. The temples of Pergamon bristled with sculpture. In this age of wonders, to build big was to assert relevance. But there was also a spiritual dimension to such undertakings. Greek religion was deeply tied to civic life, and dedicating a colossal statue to a god was an act that blended piety with politics. For the Rhodians, Helios' blessing was intertwined with their maritime fortune. Their city's very prosperity seemed to flow from his favor. The Colossus would therefore not only honor the god, but act as a perpetual prayer cast in bronze. Rhodes itself was well suited for such ambition. The island had a thriving tradition of craftsmanship, especially in bronze work, shipbuilding, and masonry. It also boasted a political stability rare in the era, a stability that allowed for decades-long projects without the constant threat of civil upheaval. With wealth flowing from its trade networks and pride swelling from its military triumph, Rhodes in the early 3rd century BC was a city ready to immortalize itself. Still, the decision was bold almost to the point of recklessness. Constructing a statue of unprecedented size required not only resources but vision, technical skill, and the will to take on risks no one had yet faced in sculpture. The task would fall to Chares of Lindos, a Rhodian sculptor and pupil of Lysippos, one of the most celebrated artists of the Greek world. Lysippos was known for his mastery of proportion and for pushing the boundaries of scale, skills Charles would need in abundance. But even with such talent, the challenges were immense. How do you balance tons of metal on a frame that will withstand wind and earthquakes? How do you transport and raise bronze sheets higher than any crane had yet reached? These were questions with no clear answers in the beginning. And yet, this was the age of wonders. The spirit of the era was not cautious. It was experimental, confident, almost hubristic. Across the Mediterranean, rulers and cities alike seemed driven by the belief that human ingenuity could match, even outdo, the works of the gods. To the Rhodians, the Colossus was more than a gamble. It was destiny. As the first plans were drawn and the first foundations marked out in the harbor city, Rhodes stepped into a new chapter of its history. The island's fate would be forever tied to this singular project, not just in the years of construction that followed, but in the centuries of legend and longing it would leave behind. And as with all great undertakings, the journey from idea to reality would prove as remarkable as the monument itself. When the decision was made to honor Helios with a monument that would tower over Rhodes, the responsibility for this unprecedented project fell to Charles of Lindos. His reputation was already established. He was a master sculptor, trained under Lysippos, whose work had transformed Greek sculpture by emphasizing slender proportions and lifelike detail. Yet what lay before Charles was unlike anything he, or anyone, had attempted. There was no blueprint, no precedent. The task was to merge art, engineering, and the raw will of an entire city into a single colossus of bronze and iron. The ancient sources tell us that the statue was to stand around 33 meters, 108 feet, high, making it one of the tallest statues in the ancient world. This height was not chosen arbitrarily. It was an intentional statement of grandeur, pushing the limits of what the bronze casting and construction techniques of the time could support. To achieve this, Charles had to design an internal framework strong enough to bear not only the immense weight of the bronze plates that would form the outer skin, but also to withstand the winds that swept the harbor and the tremors of the earth. The foundation came first. The Rhodians selected a sturdy base within the city's harbor area. Its exact location is still debated by historians, with some believing it stood near the Mandrake harbor, others proposing a site further inland. Charles oversaw the excavation of deep trenches that were filled with massive stone blocks. The stability of this foundation was critical. A giant's feet could not rest on shifting ground. Some scholars suggest that a ring of lead may have been used at the base to absorb shocks from seismic activity, an early form of earthquake-resistant engineering. The construction itself began from the feet upward. Ancient sculptors typically used a method known as the lost wax casting technique for bronze statues, but for a project of this scale, adaptations were necessary. Bronze plates were cast in manageable sections, each shaped to fit a portion of the statue's anatomy, then hammered and riveted onto an iron framework. The iron was crucial. It formed the skeleton of the Colossus, distributing weight and resisting bending under its own mass. To hold this frame together, wooden scaffolding was erected around and inside the growing structure, creating a forest of timbers that climbed higher with each completed section. Logistics posed a constant challenge. Each bronze plate, though smaller than the whole, was still heavy enough to require careful lifting. Ropes, pulleys, and capstans, operated by teams of laborers, hoisted the plates into position. Artisans worked at dizzying heights, riveting the bronze while balancing on planks and scaffolds. It was slow, dangerous work. The heat of the Mediterranean sun beat down on workers as they hammered and shaped the metal, and any mistake could mean a piece slipping and crashing to the ground, shattering weeks of labor. The statue's pose is still debated today, and much of what we know may be legend. Some later depictions imagine the Colossus straddling the harbor entrance, with ships passing between its legs, but most historians dismiss this as physically impractical. More likely, Helios stood on a solid base, perhaps 1 foot slightly forward in a dynamic stance, his gaze toward the horizon, a cloak draped over one shoulder, and one hand raised, either holding a torch, a spear, or the reins of a chariot. Charles would have drawn from the established iconography of Helios, but scaled to a magnitude that transformed the familiar into the sublime. The choice of materials was both practical and symbolic. Bronze, with its golden sheen under sunlight, echoed the radiance of the sun god himself. The bronze used for the Colossus was likely recycled from the siege engines left behind by Demetrius Poliorcetes, turning the tools of attempted conquest into a lasting emblem of freedom. Iron, less noble in appearance but stronger in function, was hidden within, the unseen strength that held the god aloft. Together, they created a statue that was as much a feat of metallurgy as of art. Years passed as the Colossus rose, section by section. It was not a continuous upward climb. Storms, supply shortages, and the need for precise craftsmanship slowed progress. Yet the work never halted for long. As the legs were completed, The scaffolding was extended upward to the torso, then the arms, and finally the head. This was the most challenging stage. The head, with its intricate facial features, was both heavy and delicate. Artisans had to ensure that the expressions and proportions were perfect despite the enormous scale. Some accounts suggest that the head alone could hold several people inside during construction. The process took approximately 12 years to complete. By the time the last bronze plate was riveted into place and the scaffolding came down, Rhodes had a new guardian. Helios towered above the harbor, catching the first light of dawn each morning. His bronze skin glowed in the sun, his form visible from miles out at sea, a beacon not of navigation, but of pride. The Colossus was not merely a statue. It was an announcement to every sailor, merchant, and rival power that Rhodes stood under divine protection. In its completion, the Colossus embodied the spirit of the Hellenistic age, bold, ambitious, and unafraid to test the limits of human capability. For Charles, it was the crowning achievement of a career, though legend has it he never lived to see its unveiling, dying before the final stage of work. Whether or not this detail is true, this information has not been verified. The legacy of his vision endured far beyond his lifetime. The birth of the Colossus was a fusion of art and technology, religion and politics, ambition and resilience. It was a wonder not only of size, but of meaning, a reminder that even in an age without cranes, steel, or modern engineering software, human determination could raise a god from the earth. But as history would soon prove, even the mightiest creations are not immune to the forces of nature. From the moment the last scaffolding was taken down and the bronze face of Helios looked out over the waters, the Colossus of Rhodes became more than just an engineering feat. It was a living symbol, one whose meaning was layered in politics, religion, and identity. For the Rhodians, it was the embodiment of everything they had endured and everything they aspired to be, a beacon to their allies, a warning to their enemies, and a prayer cast into metal for the favor of the gods. In the Hellenistic world, symbols mattered as much as armies. This was a time when city-states competed for influence not only through military might, but through the grandeur of their public works. Monumental art had the power to project authority across seas, to announce to every traveler and trader who passed through a harbor that here was a people of means, unity, and vision. The Colossus did this with unmatched eloquence. At over 30 meters tall, gleaming in the Aegean sun, it dwarfed every ship that entered Rhodes. Its presence alone suggested that Rhodes was more than just a strategic waypoint. It was a place favored by divine power, a city chosen by Helios himself. Religiously, the Colossus was a profound act of devotion. Helios was not a marginal deity on Rhodes. He was its patron, woven into the island's founding myths. Every year, the Rhodians held the Haleia, a festival in his honor, with athletic contests, sacrifices, and a ceremonial chariot race. By building the Colossus, they had elevated their devotion to unprecedented heights, literally. For the citizens, the statue was a constant reminder that the god watched over them, that his light blessed their endeavors on sea and land. In a time when divine favor was seen as essential for prosperity and survival, the Colossus was as much a protective talisman as a work of art. Politically, the statue was a declaration of independence. The bronze that formed its body had once been part of the siege engines of Demetrius Poliorcetes, the warlord who had tried, and failed, to conquer the island. To cast those remnants into the image of their god was an act of transformation. The tools of oppression turned into an enduring proclamation of freedom. Every rival power that saw it would know that Rhodes had faced the greatest military machines of the age and not only survived but thrived. The Colossus also communicated Rhodes' role as a cultural and economic hub. The island's wealth came from its mastery of maritime trade, and the statue reinforced its image as a safe, well-guarded harbor where commerce could flourish. Sailors and merchants who saw Helios towering over the city might be reassured that they were entering a place protected by both divine and human vigilance. Over time, the Colossus became part of Rhodes' identity in the minds of visitors, an image that persisted long after the statue itself was gone. For the Rhodians themselves, the Colossus was not just an object to look at, but a source of civic pride. It was a shared achievement, funded by the spoils of victory, but built by the hands of local craftsmen and laborers. Everyone in the city had a stake in it, if not in the physical construction, then in its meaning. It was a visual shorthand for the unity that had allowed them to withstand the siege and for the prosperity they hoped would last for generations. The aesthetic choices Charles made also contributed to its symbolic power. The scale alone conveyed majesty, but so did the composition. Though the precise pose is lost to history, it likely drew from established iconography that depicted Helios as youthful, strong, and radiant. If he held a torch or spear aloft, it would have suggested vigilance and readiness. If his gaze was fixed outward over the sea, it was as if he were surveying the world beyond Rhodes, a guardian scanning for threats or opportunities. Every curve of muscle, every fold of the bronze cloak, was calculated to present not just a god, but the idealized image of Rhodes itself, resilient, powerful, and shining with purpose. The Colossus symbolism was reinforced by its inclusion among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Though the list was a later creation, the fact that ancient writers placed it alongside the pyramids of Egypt, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and the Lighthouse of Alexandria speaks to the awe it inspired. Wonders were not merely architectural marvels. They were markers of human achievement, stories told to inspire and instruct. In that sense, the Colossus was as much a narrative as it was an object, a story cast in bronze about what a city could become when it united under a common purpose. But symbols, however powerful, are also vulnerable. For all its grandeur, the Colossus was still a physical object subject to the forces of nature. The same sea winds that filled Rhodian sails could buffet its great form. The same earth that nourished the island's crops could tremble under the strain of tectonic forces. The Rhodians may have seen the Colossus as eternal, but history would soon remind them, and us, that even the mightiest works of human hands are impermanent. For now, though, in its early years, the Colossus stood as an unambiguous triumph. It was art as politics, politics as faith, faith as a daily presence in the lives of all who walked beneath its shadow. And in that moment, Rhodes had achieved something rare in history, a creation that truly embodied the ideals of its people while commanding the respect of the world beyond its shores. For more than half a century, the Colossus of Rhodes stood as the unchallenged guardian of the harbor, its bronze surface catching the first and last light of each day. Generations of Rhodians grew up with its presence fixed against the skyline, so constant that it seemed beyond the reach of time itself. And yet, in the year 226 BCE, the ground beneath the island reminded them of a truth as old as the world. The earth moves, and when it does, even gods can fall. Rhodes lay in a region of the Aegean that has always been seismically active, the slow grinding of tectonic plates sending shockwaves through the islands. The earthquake that struck that year was no ordinary tremor. Ancient accounts describe walls collapsing, temples splitting, and entire sections of the city sliding toward the harbor. The sea itself reportedly surged, sending waves into streets that had never known salt water. In the chaos, the Colossus, despite its deep foundation and iron framework, could not withstand the violent motion. The details of its fall are lost to history, but scholars speculate on several possibilities. The statue's height and relatively narrow base made it vulnerable to lateral shaking. Even a slight shift at the foundation could have compromised the iron skeleton. As the ground heaved, joints might have snapped, bronze plates could have buckled, and the immense weight above would have pulled the structure down. Whether the collapse was sudden or a progressive failure over several quakes, the result was the same. Helios fell. Ancient sources say the statue broke at the knees, its upper body crashing to the ground in pieces. The sound must have been like thunder, bronze plates shattering, timbers snapping, stone blocks toppling. In moments, what had once been the pride of Rhodes lay scattered along the harbor, a ruin of twisted metal and crushed stone. For the people who had known it all their lives, the sight must have been both shocking and deeply unsettling, as if the god himself had turned away. In the aftermath, the city faced not only the physical destruction of buildings and infrastructure, but also the psychological blow of losing its most potent symbol. The Colossus was more than art. It was the embodiment of Rhodian identity and divine favor. Its fall raised uneasy questions. Had Helios abandoned them? Was the earthquake a punishment, or simply the indifference of nature? Offers to rebuild the Colossus came quickly, most notably from Ptolemy III of Egypt, a powerful ally who saw the opportunity to restore the wonder. Yet the Rhodians declined. According to later historians, the Delphic oracle advised against rebuilding, warning that the destruction was the will of the gods. Whether this was a sincere religious conviction or a political decision cloaked in divine authority, the result was the same. The Colossus would not rise again. Instead, the remains were left where they fell. For centuries, travelers and merchants arriving at Rhodes could see the broken form of Helios lying along the shore. Ancient writers marveled at the sheer size of the fallen statue, noting that few could wrap their arms around its thumb and that each finger was larger than most statues. The bronze plates, greened by centuries of salt and air, lay like pieces of a giant's armor scattered after battle. These ruins, oddly enough, became a new kind of attraction. Pilgrims and tourists came not only to see the thriving city of Rhodes, but to walk among the fragments of what had been one of the 7 wonders of the world. In a way, the broken Colossus continued to serve its original purpose. It still inspired awe, still spoke of the island's past glory, even if now it also told a cautionary tale about the limits of human achievement. For Rhodes, the decision not to rebuild may have been pragmatic. The cost of construction had been enormous, even in the flush years after the siege. In the wake of a devastating earthquake, resources were needed for immediate repairs to homes, walls, and harbors. Accepting Ptolemy's help might have meant political obligations the Rhodians were unwilling to take on. And perhaps, too, there was a recognition that the first Colossus was unique, born of a particular moment in history that could not be recreated. In the centuries that followed, Rhodes continued to prosper as a maritime power, but the skyline was forever altered. Without the towering figure of Helios, the city relied on its bustling ports, its skilled sailors, and its strategic alliances to project its strength. The Colossus lived on in memory, retold in stories, and reimagined in the minds of those who had never seen it whole. The fall of the Colossus marked a turning point in its legend. While it had once been a symbol of triumph and divine favor, in ruin it became something else. A monument to impermanence, a reminder that even the most extraordinary works are temporary. And yet, paradoxically, this impermanence is part of what ensured its immortality. The mystery of what it truly looked like, the tragedy of its destruction, and the enduring fascination with its colossal scale all combined to secure its place in human imagination long after the last bronze plate was carried away. Helios had fallen, but in falling, he had become eternal. When the Colossus of Rhodes lay shattered along the harbor, its story might have ended as a cautionary tale of hubris, one more ancient monument claimed by time and disaster. Yet, remarkably, the ruin itself became a new kind of wonder, shaping imagination, art, and ambition for centuries to come. In its broken form, the Colossus began a second life, one that would outlast even the city's golden age. For travelers in antiquity, Rhodes was already a destination. The island's location at the crossroads of Mediterranean trade routes meant it was constantly receiving merchants, envoys, and pilgrims. Long after the statue's fall, these visitors came to see what remained, and ancient writers were quick to record their impressions. Philo of Byzantium, in his famous account of the 7 wonders, marveled at the fallen pieces, describing the immense size of its limbs. Strabo, the geographer, echoed this awe, noting that the statue's thumb was larger than most statues in Greece. This kind of testimony did more than preserve the memory of the Colossus. It transformed the ruin into a new kind of monument, one whose absence of wholeness only fueled the imagination. The fragments themselves told a story. Bronze plates, mottled green with age, curled like fallen leaves beside massive iron rods that had once been its internal framework. Blocks of stone from the base lay in irregular heaps, bearing the marks of ancient chisels. Some travelers claimed they could still trace the lines of Helios' face in the broken pieces, the proud features now weathered but unmistakable. Whether these accounts were accurate or shaped by wishful thinking, they gave the ruin an almost sacred quality, as if the god's spirit still lingered there. Over time, the Colossus became an enduring part of Rhodian identity. While its physical presence was gone, its image appeared on coins, seals, and decorative arts. These depictions often took liberties with scale and form, showing Helios with a radiant crown, his gaze fixed toward the horizon. Some images even placed the statue astride the harbor mouth, a pose that most historians now consider logistically impossible, but which became one of the most persistent and romanticized visions of the wonder. The afterlife of the Colossus was also fed by the literary tradition of the Seven Wonders of the ancient world. By the Roman era, the list had crystallized into a set of marvels that every educated person was expected to know. The Colossus' inclusion ensured that its fame spread far beyond Rhodes, becoming part of a shared cultural vocabulary. Even people who had never seen the island could conjure an image of a massive bronze figure watching over the sea. This mental image, half fact, half fantasy, was often more powerful than reality itself. In the Middle Ages, the Colossus took on new symbolic roles. For some Christian writers, it became a moral allegory, a reminder of the impermanence of earthly glory. They recast Helios not as a god, but as a pagan idol, toppled by divine will to humble human pride. In Islamic tradition, too, the statue entered folklore, with tales of its vast treasures and mysterious mechanisms. The Arabic writers al-Masudi and al-Idrisi mention the wonder, though often blending it with legends of mechanical marvels and magical guardians. Its ultimate disappearance from the Rhodian landscape came in 654 CE, when Arab forces under Muawiyah captured the island. According to later Byzantine accounts, whose accuracy is debated, the remains of the Colossus were sold as scrap to a merchant from Edessa who supposedly needed 900 camels to carry the bronze away. This image of an ancient wonder reduced to cargo, parceled out to be melted and repurposed, is haunting. Whether the details are true or exaggerated, they mark the end of the Colossus as a physical presence and the beginning of its complete transformation into legend. Yet the absence only deepened its hold on the human mind. In Renaissance Europe, as scholars rediscovered classical texts and artists sought inspiration from antiquity, the Colossus was reborn in paintings, engravings, and architectural fantasies. These depictions often amplified its scale, showing it straddling the harbor or holding a massive torch, ideas that had no archaeological basis but captured the spirit of grandeur that the statue represented. The Colossus became a touchstone for thinking about human potential, the ability to conceive and build something so audacious that it defied imagination. In modern times, the idea of rebuilding the Colossus has surfaced repeatedly. Proposals in the 20th and 21st centuries have ranged from faithful reconstructions to futuristic reinterpretations, some envisioning the figure as a multi-use cultural center or a beacon for global peace. Each proposal has sparked debate about the purpose of such a project. Should it honor the original in form and function, or should it serve as a contemporary statement inspired by the past? What is clear is that the Colossus never truly vanished. It migrated from stone and bronze into memory and myth, sustained by centuries of storytelling, art, and longing. Even in absence, it shaped the identity of Rhodes, influenced global culture, and stood as a metaphor for human ambition. The lost wonder was never entirely lost. It simply changed its form, becoming a giant in the imagination rather than the skyline. The afterlife of the Colossus is, in some ways, more enduring than its original life. In its fall, it ceased to be just a Rhodian monument and became a shared human inheritance. Its broken limbs lay scattered on one island, but its image stretched across continents and centuries, reminding each generation that greatness leaves traces long after the stones have fallen and the bronze has corroded. The Colossus of Rhodes is gone. No foundation to walk upon, no surviving fragments to run a hand across. But modern scholarship has learned to work with absence. Today, archaeologists, engineers, and historians do not accept that the loss of the physical statue must mean the loss of understanding. Instead, they apply the tools of science, the discipline of historical method, and the creativity of engineering imagination to recover what can be known and to envision what might still be possible. The first step in studying an ancient wonder is to strip away the accumulated layers of myth. For the Colossus, This means confronting the popular image of a giant bronze figure straddling the harbor mouth, ships sailing between its legs. It is a striking vision, but almost certainly impossible from an engineering perspective. No ancient bronze structure could support such a span without collapsing under its own weight, and no evidence of such a harbor-spanning foundation has ever been found. Instead, scholars focus on accounts from the earliest sources, written closer to the time of the statue's existence, which describe it as standing solidly on a single base, most likely near the harbor rather than over it. Modern archaeological surveys of Rhodes have sought to pinpoint the statue's exact location. Ground-penetrating radar and subsurface imaging have been used in areas around Mandrake Harbor and the ancient Acropolis, searching for disturbances in the soil that could indicate a massive foundation. These studies have not yet yielded conclusive evidence, but they have identified zones where further excavation could reveal ancient construction layers. The problem, as with many ancient cities, is that modern Rhodes sits atop its ancient remains, and any deep digging risks disturbing current infrastructure. Material analysis is another tool in the modern investigator's arsenal. Ancient sources mention that the Colossus was made of bronze plates over an iron framework, with stone infill to add mass and stability. By studying surviving examples of large-scale Hellenistic bronze statuary, such as fragments from the statue of Zeus at Olympia or the bronze warriors recovered from the Sea off Rheas, researchers can reconstruct the casting techniques, joinery methods, and surface treatments that would have been used. Metallurgical studies of similar-era bronzes reveal the typical copper-tin ratios, impurities, and corrosion patterns, giving insight into both the appearance and structural properties of the Colossus. Historians also examine parallels from the wider ancient world. Large-scale statues from Hellenistic and Roman times show an evolving mastery of internal frameworks, balance, and load distribution. For example, the statue of Athena Promachos in Athens, built earlier in the classical period, demonstrated that Greek sculptors were capable of monumental scale, though the Colossus pushed those limits dramatically. By combining historical context with comparative analysis, scholars can build a plausible picture of the statue's form and engineering. In the modern era, digital technology has become one of the most powerful tools for reconstructing lost wonders. 3D modeling allows researchers to test different hypotheses about the Colossus' height, stance, and proportions. Computer simulations can account for structural stresses, wind load, and seismic resilience, providing insight into how the original might have been designed and where its weaknesses lay. These same tools are invaluable for anyone contemplating a modern reconstruction, as they allow engineers to model the effects of materials like steel, titanium, or carbon fiber on stability and durability. The interdisciplinary nature of the Colossus study means that historians must work alongside structural engineers, metallurgists, architects, and even seismologists. For example, understanding the earthquake that toppled the statue involves analyzing geological data from the Eastern Aegean and modeling the likely ground acceleration during the 226 BC quake. This in turn helps explain why the Colossus collapsed the way it did, and what a modern version would need to survive in the same environment. Beyond the purely technical, there is also the matter of interpreting the cultural and symbolic aspects of the Colossus. Modern scholarship places the statue in the broader context of Hellenistic monumental art, which often served political as well as religious purposes. The Colossus was not simply a devotional image of Helios. It was a statement of Rhodian resilience after surviving a siege, a public declaration of the city's wealth, skill, and divine favor. For a modern reconstruction to be meaningful, it would need to speak to contemporary values while acknowledging the original's role in its own time. Museums and exhibitions have played a role in keeping the Colossus in public consciousness. Full-scale replicas have never been built, but smaller-scale models, some historically grounded, others based on popular myth, are displayed in collections around the world. These exhibitions often combine archaeological evidence with interactive digital reconstructions, allowing visitors to walk around a virtual Colossus or view it as it might have appeared against the Rhodian skyline. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of modern study is how it shifts the question from what did it look like to what could it look like again. As techniques for building tall, seismically resistant structures have advanced, the theoretical obstacles to reconstructing the Colossus have diminished. The debate now centers less on feasibility and more on intent. Should a rebuilt Colossus be an exact replica of the original, as far as we can determine? Or should it be a reimagining, informed by modern art, technology, and global cultural values? In this way, modern eyes on the Colossus are not merely looking backward, they are also looking forward, into a space where the past and future might meet in bronze and steel above the Aegean. The science that once revealed its secrets now whispers a tantalizing promise. What was lost might yet rise again, not as a relic of a vanished age, but as a living monument to the enduring human desire to build something that will outlast us. The idea of reconstructing the Colossus of Rhodes with modern technology is not just an exercise in archaeology, it is an engineering challenge of the highest order. It requires reimagining a monument that once stood as one of the tallest statues of the ancient world, translating its symbolic grandeur into a design that meets the rigorous safety, durability, and environmental demands of the 21st century. The question is no longer whether we could rebuild the Colossus, but how we would do it. To start, the original Colossus is thought to have stood around 33 meters, 108 feet, high, roughly the height of the modern Statue of Liberty's pedestal without her torch. For its time, this was an extraordinary feat, but today, engineering can produce structures many times taller. If modern architects chose to replicate the original scale exactly, the project would be relatively straightforward by current standards. However, most contemporary proposals envision something far grander, up to 150 meters in height, which would make the new Colossus not just a nod to the past, but a commanding presence on the global stage. Such scale demands modern materials. Ancient Rhodians used a bronze skin supported by an iron frame, with stone infill to give mass and stability. In today's construction, a steel or titanium skeleton would replace the iron, offering far greater strength and resilience to seismic forces. For the exterior, bronze remains an appealing choice for its historical authenticity and weathering qualities. It develops a green patina over time that would echo the ancient statue's aged surface. However, bronze is expensive and heavy, so some designs opt for a composite cladding with a bronze finish to achieve the same appearance without the weight. One of the greatest challenges in reconstructing the Colossus is Rhodes' seismic activity. The earthquake that destroyed the original in 226 BCE is a reminder that the island sits in a tectonically active zone. Modern engineering would require a deep, reinforced foundation, likely sunk into bedrock, to prevent the toppling forces that doomed its predecessor. Base isolation systems, which allow a structure to move independently from the ground during a quake, could be incorporated to absorb seismic shocks. This technology has been used in skyscrapers and critical facilities worldwide, but scaling it to a massive freestanding statue would require precision engineering. Wind is another factor. A statue of such height and slender form would need to be aerodynamically stable to resist the fierce gusts of the Aegean. Wind tunnel testing, already standard for tall buildings and bridges, would be essential to refine the pose, mass distribution, and surface texture to reduce turbulence and oscillation. Computer simulations could predict stress points and suggest reinforcements before a single beam is fabricated. Construction logistics present their own hurdles. Building a structure of this magnitude on a small island poses transportation challenges for materials and equipment. Modular construction, fabricating sections of the statue on the mainland and transporting them by sea, might offer an efficient solution. These sections could then be assembled on-site using high-capacity cranes, similar to the methods employed in building offshore oil platforms. The question of design fidelity looms large. Archaeological evidence for the original's exact appearance is incomplete, leaving room for interpretation. Should the new Colossus be a faithful reconstruction based on scholarly consensus, or a bold reinterpretation that reflects modern artistic vision? Advocates for historical accuracy argue that the project should aim to honor the ancient Rhodians' craftsmanship, while others see an opportunity to create a landmark that embodies contemporary values, sustainability, multiculturalism, and technological progress. In recent years, design competitions have yielded striking proposals. Some envision Helios in a more dynamic pose, perhaps with one arm raised holding a light source that doubles as a lighthouse beacon. Others propose integrating the statue into a multi-level cultural complex, with observation decks, exhibition spaces, and performance venues built into its structure. This would turn the Colossus into both a historical homage and a living economic asset, drawing tourists while serving the community. Lighting and energy use offer another chance to merge ancient inspiration with modern innovation. A solar-powered lighting system could illuminate the Colossus at night, symbolically linking it to Helios, the sun god. Advances in LED technology and renewable energy generation could make the monument not only self-sufficient, but a net contributor to the island's energy grid. Transparent photovoltaic panels could be incorporated subtly into the statue's surfaces, making the monument a functioning solar plant, as well as a work of art. Cost estimates for such an undertaking vary widely, from tens of millions to over $1 billion depending on size, materials, and amenities. Funding models might combine public investment, international cultural grants, and private sponsorship. The return on investment would not be purely financial. Rebuilding the Colossus could elevate Rhodes' global profile, boost tourism, and serve as a symbol of cultural revival. Finally, there is the question of permanence. Ancient builders knew that earthquakes and war could topple even the most impressive monuments. Modern engineers have the tools to create something that could last for centuries, but they must also consider adaptability. Modular components and replaceable panels could allow for easier maintenance and upgrades over time, ensuring that the Colossus remains not only a relic of the past, but a living part of the island's future. In the end, the engineering of a new Colossus would be less about overcoming technical limitations. Our era has the means, and more about aligning purpose, design, and meaning. If Rhodes chooses to raise its sun god once again, the result will be a structure that stands at the intersection of history and innovation, a bridge between an ancient wonder and the possibilities of the modern world. Rebuilding the Colossus of Rhodes would not be a purely architectural or engineering achievement. It would be a cultural statement, a geopolitical signal, and a deeply symbolic act resonating far beyond the shores of the Aegean. The original Colossus was born from a moment of triumph over adversity, erected to commemorate Rhodes' survival after a brutal siege in 305 BCE. Its bronze skin and towering stance proclaimed the island's resilience to all who sailed into its harbors. A modern Colossus, if it rose, would inevitably carry its own layered meanings in the eyes of the world. For Greece, the project would be a chance to reaffirm its place as both guardian and innovator of global heritage. Greece is already home to monuments that anchor Western cultural identity: the Parthenon, the theater at Epidaurus, the sanctuaries of Delphi and Olympia. Rebuilding the Colossus would not only restore one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, but also serve as a testament to Greece's continued ability to balance preservation with progress. This would be especially potent in an era where cultural tourism is a major economic driver and national identity is often expressed through heritage projects. For Rhodes itself, the impact would be transformative. The island's identity is a tapestry of Hellenistic glory, medieval fortifications from the Knights Hospitaller, and Ottoman-era influences. A new Colossus would instantly become the island's defining landmark, its image emblazoned on coins, stamps, and tourist brochures. It would alter the skyline, becoming the focal point for visitors arriving by sea or air. This influx could trigger a tourism boom rivaling that of the Acropolis in Athens or the pyramids of Giza. Hotels, restaurants, museums, and local artisans would all benefit, potentially revitalizing the economy. But at the same time, the sheer scale of change would demand careful planning to avoid overwhelming the island's infrastructure and heritage sites. Culturally, the Colossus could serve as a powerful symbol for the Mediterranean region as a whole. In a world fractured by political divisions, environmental crises, and cultural tensions, a monument dedicated to the sun god could be reframed as a universal emblem of light, unity, and renewal. Its dedication could transcend its ancient origins, celebrating not just Rhodes or Greece, but the shared heritage of humanity. This is a vision that appeals to UNESCO and other cultural organizations, which could lend legitimacy and funding if the project is framed as a global cultural endeavor. Yet the very visibility of such a project means it would be caught in the cross-currents of politics. Funding alone could become a point of contention, whether it comes primarily from the Greek government, private investors, or international backers. Involving foreign donors could invite political strings, with some states seeing the Colossus as an opportunity for soft power influence. In the Mediterranean, where maritime boundaries, resource rights, and historical narratives are often disputed, even a monument intended as a beacon of unity could be perceived as a strategic statement. The Colossus' symbolic role could also extend into global politics. Imagine its unveiling broadcast live to millions around the world, a dazzling spectacle of light and engineering, accompanied by speeches from global leaders. Such an event would inevitably be interpreted through the lens of international relations. Some might see it as a celebration of peace and cultural achievement. Others might read it as a statement of Greece's cultural primacy in the Eastern Mediterranean, or as a reminder of Europe's long-standing historical narratives. Domestically, the Colossus could become a touchstone in debates over cultural identity. In an increasingly globalized Greece, where economic migration, EU integration, and generational shifts are reshaping the social fabric, a monument of such scale could be embraced by some as a unifying emblem, while others might critique it as an expensive vanity project. Environmental advocates could challenge the carbon footprint of construction or the potential strain on local resources from increased tourism. Balancing these perspectives would require a careful narrative that frames the Colossus not only as a nod to the past, but as a forward-looking project grounded in sustainability, inclusivity, and shared benefit. The artistic interpretation of the Colossus could also influence its reception. A purely historical reconstruction might resonate with traditionalists and historians, but risk feeling outdated to younger audiences. Conversely, a bold reimagining, perhaps incorporating contemporary sculpture, interactive technology, or even augmented reality experiences, could capture the global imagination but draw criticism from purists. Here lies one of the most delicate political questions. Who gets to decide what the new Colossus looks like? The answer would need to balance scholarly authority, public opinion, and the input of contemporary artists. Beyond politics and tourism, the Colossus could play a role in cultural diplomacy. Rhodes could host international art festivals, engineering conferences, or cultural summits beneath the statue's gaze. Partnerships with cities that host their own monumental icons. The Statue of Liberty in New York, Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro, the Motherland Calls in Volgograd, could create a network of symbolic landmarks dedicated to global cooperation. Such initiatives could give the Colossus a diplomatic life far beyond its stone and metal. In the end, the ripples of a modern Colossus would not be confined to Rhodes or even Greece. Like the original, it would stand as a statement visible to all who approach by sea, a symbol that would inevitably be interpreted, claimed, and contested in ways no single architect, historian, or politician could fully control. This unpredictability is part of the monument's potential power. It would be more than an object. It would be a conversation, one that might last for centuries. The rebirth of the Colossus of Rhodes would not simply be the unveiling of a monument. It would be the ignition of an economic engine with the potential to reshape the island's fortunes for generations. Tourism is already the lifeblood of Rhodes, with its sunlit beaches, medieval old town, and ancient ruins drawing over 2 million visitors each year. The arrival of a reconstructed Colossus, especially one that could rival modern megastructures in size and spectacle, would transform this steady flow into a tidal wave. But with great opportunity comes the burden of stewardship, and history has shown that rapid economic growth tied to a single attraction can be both a blessing and a curse. In purely financial terms, the Colossus could become one of the most profitable cultural landmarks on Earth. Consider the economic halo effect of monuments like the Eiffel Tower or the Sydney Opera House. Not only do they attract ticket sales, but they also create a brand identity that boosts every other aspect of the local economy. Hotels fill to capacity, restaurants extend their hours, retail sales climb, and transportation networks hum with activity. A similar effect in Rhodes could mean billions in added revenue over a decade, revitalizing the island's economy and providing funds for infrastructure, education, and cultural preservation. The statue itself could be monetized in multiple ways without diminishing its symbolic value. An internal elevator system leading to observation decks in the statue's shoulders or head could offer panoramic views of the Aegean, each ticket contributing to a maintenance and heritage fund. Integrated museums or immersive multimedia exhibitions within the base could tell the story of the original Colossus, the siege it commemorated, and the technological marvels behind its reconstruction. Exclusive evening tours, gala events beneath the illuminated figure, and annual festivals could further diversify the revenue stream. Beyond direct tourism, a modern Colossus would strengthen Rhodes' position in the global cultural marketplace. The island could become a hub for conferences, art biennales, and even film productions seeking the drama of a colossal backdrop. Its image would adorn everything from postage stamps to international advertising campaigns, creating a multiplier effect for Greek tourism as a whole. In an era when destinations compete fiercely for attention, the Colossus could make Rhodes synonymous with wonder. Yet such opportunity carries risks. Tourism saturation can strain local resources, inflate housing prices, and erode the very culture that attracts visitors in the first place. Venice's battle against over-tourism offers a cautionary tale. There, the influx of visitors has priced locals out of their homes and strained infrastructure to the breaking point. Rhodes would need to plan carefully to avoid similar pitfalls. This could mean limiting daily visitor numbers to the Colossus itself, enforcing sustainable tourism policies, and ensuring that economic benefits are distributed across the island rather than concentrated in a few corporate hands. The environmental impact of a tourism surge must also be considered. Increased flights, cruise ship dockings, and local transportation could raise carbon emissions and put pressure on the island's energy and water systems. If the Colossus were built with sustainability at its core, powered by renewable energy, constructed with low-carbon materials, and integrated into a broader green tourism strategy, it could serve as a model for climate-conscious heritage projects. This would not only appeal to environmentally aware travelers, but also future-proof the monument against regulatory and reputational challenges. Economically, there is also the question of resilience. While a Colossus would likely draw visitors for decades, trends in tourism can be unpredictable. Global recessions, pandemics, or political instability can cause sudden drops in travel. To mitigate this, Rhodes would need to ensure that the Colossus is part of a diversified economic strategy that strengthens other sectors, agriculture, crafts, education, while using tourism revenue to fund long-term development. The cultural legacy of the Colossus adds another layer of responsibility. For Rhodians, the statue would not just be an attraction, it would be a symbol woven into their identity, as much a part of the island's soul as its ancient harbors and sunlit hills. Preserving this connection means involving local voices in decision-making, from the statue's design to the way its story is told. The Colossus should not be imposed upon the island as a corporate product, but embraced as a community creation, its benefits flowing back to those who live in its shadow. Global perception would also shape the Colossus legacy. If it is seen as a respectful restoration of history, it could become a symbol of cultural pride, not just for Greece, but for humanity's shared heritage. If, however, it is dismissed as a commercial gimmick or an environmental liability, it risks becoming a cautionary tale of misplaced ambition. This is where narrative becomes as important as engineering. How the project is framed, from its first press release to its ribbon-cutting ceremony, will influence how future generations remember it. Ultimately, the Colossus of Rhodes, ancient or modern, is more than metal and stone. It is a mirror reflecting the ambitions, values, and ingenuity of the society that builds it. In the 3rd century BCE, it reflected a city's triumph over its enemies. In the 21st century, it could reflect a world striving to balance heritage with innovation, tourism with sustainability, and economic gain with cultural integrity. If Rhodes can strike this balance, the new Colossus will not just stand above the harbor. It will stand as proof that humanity can honor its past while building a future worth inheriting. If the original Colossus of Rhodes was a marvel of its time, bronze plates bound over an iron skeleton anchored to a stone base, then a modern reincarnation would be a testament to the 21st century's mastery over matter. The ancient builders worked with the materials and methods available to them. Bronze smelted from copper and tin, hammered into plates, iron rivets, stone foundations, and wooden scaffolding that creaked under the weight of progress. Today, we stand on the shoulders of 2 millennia of metallurgy, structural engineering, and materials science, with the ability to create structures the ancient world could barely imagine. The question is not whether we could build a new Colossus. It is how to do so in a way that ensures it endures storms, earthquakes, and centuries of salt-laden air. The choice of core structural material would be the first decision. Bronze could return, but as a skin rather than the skeleton. Modern bronze alloys are corrosion-resistant, yet still prone to oxidation in a marine environment, developing a protective patina over time. For the internal frame, high-tensile steel, engineered to withstand extreme stress and fatigue, would offer strength far beyond anything chairs of Lindos could have conceived. Advances in metallurgy mean that steel today can be lighter yet stronger, allowing for a taller and more slender figure without compromising stability. In earthquake-prone regions like the Dodecanese, however, strength alone is not enough. Flexibility is essential. Here, the science of seismic-resistant design comes into play. The Colossus could be equipped with base isolators, massive bearings that allow the structure to sway gently during a quake, dissipating energy rather than resisting it. This technology has already been proven in skyscrapers in Tokyo and bridges in California. Scaling it to a statue would be an engineering challenge, but not an impossibility. Composite materials could push the boundaries further. Carbon fiber reinforced polymers offer extraordinary strength-to-weight ratios and resist both corrosion and fatigue. They could be used in high-stress internal components where minimizing weight is critical, such as outstretched arms or a raised head, reducing the load on the statue's core. Glass fiber composites, meanwhile, could be incorporated into secondary structures or decorative elements, offering resilience against the sun and sea while keeping costs manageable. Modern concrete also changes the game. The ancient world knew of lime-based mortars, but today's ultra-high-performance concretes, UHPC, can be mixed with steel or polymer fibers, achieving compressive strengths far exceeding standard concrete. A reinforced concrete core could anchor the Colossus deep into bedrock, providing a stable foundation against both wind and waves. Importantly, UHPC can be designed for longevity. Some formulations are projected to last over a century with minimal maintenance, even in aggressive marine climates. The skin of the modern Colossus could blend tradition and technology. Bronze remains the most historically resonant choice, but stainless steel offers an alternative with its own visual and symbolic appeal. Polished to a mirror finish, stainless steel could reflect the changing sky, giving the statue a living, shifting presence. Alternatively, weathering steel, like COR10, could be used for a deliberate patina effect, evoking the timelessness of antiquity while ensuring structural integrity. A hybrid approach, bronze for the outward-facing, symbolic surfaces, stainless or weathering steel for less visible elements, could satisfy both historical aesthetics and modern durability. Advances in coating technologies also expand possibilities. Nanoceramic coatings could be applied to bronze or steel surfaces to resist saltwater corrosion, graffiti, and weathering, while maintaining the material's natural look. Such treatments would dramatically reduce the maintenance burden, keeping the Colossus gleaming or patinated, if preferred, for decades at a time without costly restorations. Sustainability is another driving force in material choice. The Colossus could be a beacon not only of cultural heritage, but of environmental responsibility. Recycled metals could form a significant portion of its skin and frame, reducing the carbon footprint of construction. Even the original Colossus was said to have been made partly from bronze weapons taken from defeated invaders, a poetic precedent for transforming instruments of war into symbols of unity. Solar panels could be integrated subtly into the statue's base or even into parts of the figure itself, powering interior lighting and museum spaces. Low-impact paints, sealants, and adhesives could ensure that the construction process aligns with modern green building standards. One of the most intriguing possibilities lies in additive manufacturing, 3D printing at architectural scales. While printing the entire Colossus is beyond current capabilities, certain components, especially intricate decorative elements or internal supports, could be fabricated layer by layer with metal powders or polymers. This approach allows for geometries impossible to achieve with traditional casting or forging, reducing waste and enabling precise customization. The question of scale also factors into material selection. If the modern Colossus were to match or exceed the estimated 33 meters of the original, certain materials might suffice. But if the ambition were to create something twice that height, a true rival to contemporary megastructures, then lightweight composites and advanced alloys would become essential to manage both weight and wind resistance. Computational fluid dynamics simulations could model wind flow around the statue, guiding the choice of materials and internal bracing to ensure stability during Aegean storms. Lighting adds a final technological layer. The ancient Colossus likely stood unlit, a silhouette against the dawn. Today's version could be illuminated by programmable LED arrays, capable of subtle golden glows or dazzling light shows for festivals. Fiber optic strands embedded in the surface could make the statue shimmer at night, while remaining nearly invisible during the day. These systems could be powered entirely by renewable energy, integrating sustainability with spectacle. Ultimately, the materials of the future offer more than longevity and resilience. They offer storytelling potential. A Colossus built from recycled metals could speak to transformation and rebirth. One incorporating solar panels could symbolize harmony between humanity and nature. A hybrid of ancient bronze and cutting-edge composites could embody the dialogue between past and present. And in every rivet, weld, and plate, the builders would leave a message that human ingenuity, like the sun the Colossus once honored, can rise again after even the longest night. The dream of rebuilding the Colossus of Rhodes is one thing. The act of transforming that dream into steel, bronze, and bedrock is another entirely. It is a process that would demand the same qualities that define the ancient wonder: ambition, ingenuity, and a willingness to challenge the limits of what is technically feasible. In the 3rd century BCE, Chairs of Lindos orchestrated an achievement that left the ancient world awestruck. Today, his spiritual successors would face a challenge no less daunting, though they would have tools and knowledge unimaginable to their predecessors. The first, and perhaps most critical step, is site selection. Historical debate has swirled for centuries over where the original Colossus actually stood, whether straddling the harbor, standing beside it, or located farther inland. Modern engineering imposes stricter criteria. The statue must be anchored to a site with bedrock capable of supporting thousands of tons, free from excessive tidal erosion, and with enough space to accommodate the logistics of construction and crowds of visitors. If the Colossus were placed near the Mandrake harbor, where tradition situates it, engineers would need to conduct extensive geotechnical surveys to map the seabed, the underlying rock, and the water table. This alone could take months before a single beam is laid. Once the site is chosen, foundation design becomes the make-or-break stage. Ancient builders relied on massive stone plinths and backfilled rubble to spread the load. Today's engineers would look to deep caisson foundations, hollow shafts sunk into the bedrock, filled with reinforced concrete, capable of distributing the statue's weight evenly and resisting lateral forces from wind and seismic activity. In an earthquake-prone region like Rhodes, the foundation would also integrate base isolation systems, high-strength elastomeric bearings, or sliding pendulum isolators that allow the structure to sway without fracturing. With the foundation secured, the skeleton of the Colossus, its internal frame, would rise in a sequence of precisely calculated stages. This is where modern structural analysis comes to the fore. Engineers would model every component using finite element analysis, FEA, simulating stresses from wind gusts, seismic waves, temperature changes, and even the weight of tourists in observation decks. These simulations would reveal exactly where to reinforce the frame, where to save weight with lighter composites, and how to ensure the figure remains stable even in the face of once-in-a-century storms. The logistics of assembly present a puzzle of staggering complexity. The Colossus could be built in situ, piece by piece, with cranes lifting prefabricated sections into place. Alternatively, larger modules could be constructed off-site in specialized facilities, then transported by barge or heavy-lift helicopter, a method used for offshore oil rigs and massive bridge sections. Either approach would require precision to the millimeter, since any misalignment could cascade into structural weaknesses as the statue grows taller. Bronze skin panels, if the builders choose to honor the ancient aesthetic, would be cast in large sections using modern lost wax or sand casting techniques, then mounted to the frame with concealed fastenings. Each panel would be shaped to fit seamlessly, the joints weather-sealed to prevent corrosion. This phase would involve a marriage of artistry and engineering. Artisans patinating the bronze to achieve the desired finish, while engineers ensure that thermal expansion under the Mediterranean sun does not warp the skin. Wind loading, a factor the ancients understood only intuitively, is a dominant concern today. At heights of 30 meters or more, even moderate winds exert immense pressure. Computational fluid dynamics, CFD, models would be used early in the design phase to shape the Colossus in ways that minimize vortex shedding, the phenomenon that can cause oscillations in tall, slender structures. Engineers might subtly adjust the stance, the arm angles, or even the texture of the skin to channel airflows safely away from vulnerable points. Safety systems would be integrated from the start. Internal staircases and elevators would not only provide access for visitors, but also serve as escape routes in emergencies. Fire suppression systems, lightning protection, and continuous structural health monitoring. Sensors embedded in the frame to detect strain, vibration, and corrosion would ensure that any emerging problem is addressed before it becomes catastrophic. In this way, the Colossus would be as much a living machine as a static monument. Construction sequencing must also consider the human factor. A project of this scale would employ hundreds of workers, engineers, crane operators, welders, bronze casters, safety inspectors, operating in a confined site surrounded by the sea and an active tourist zone. Strict scheduling would minimize disruptions to local commerce while ensuring that each phase of the build flows logically into the next. A delay in one phase, such as the delivery of custom-fabricated frame segments, could ripple through the entire project timeline. And then there is the matter of cost. Estimates for rebuilding the Colossus range wildly depending on size, materials, and complexity, anywhere from $150 million for a modest reconstruction to over $1 billion for a megastructure with integrated attractions. Funding could come from a blend of public investment, private sponsorship, international cultural grants, and even crowdfunding campaigns. The financial planning must ensure not only that the Colossus is completed, but also that there are resources for its maintenance for decades to come. Public engagement during the build would be essential to maintaining enthusiasm and political support. Live-streamed progress updates, on-site viewing platforms, and educational outreach could make the construction itself a global spectacle. In a sense, the act of building the Colossus could be as unifying and inspiring as the finished monument, proof that humanity can undertake a shared project of extraordinary ambition. In the end, the challenge of engineering the Colossus in the modern age is not simply about creating something enormous. It is about creating something that embodies strength, resilience, and vision while functioning within the physical, environmental, and cultural realities of the present. The ancients built their Colossus as a statement of triumph after war. We would build ours as a statement of what is possible when technology, artistry, and determination converge, not to dominate, but to inspire. If the original Colossus of Rhodes was a declaration of victory, an embodiment of a city-state's defiance against siege, then its modern reincarnation could speak to something broader, more enduring. In the 21st century, symbols are not merely about power or dominance. They are about connection, shared purpose, and the stories humanity chooses to tell itself. The decision to rebuild the Colossus would not only resurrect a lost wonder of the ancient world, but redefine it for an age facing different challenges than chairs of Lindos could ever have imagined. In the ancient world, monumental statues often signaled divine favor or martial supremacy. Today, a rebuilt Colossus could serve as a monument to human cooperation. Rhodes sits at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa, its location a geographical metaphor for global interdependence. The new Colossus could be conceived not as a solitary Greek icon, but as a monument incorporating design motifs and engineering contributions from multiple nations. Panels of bronze could be sourced from recycled metals donated by countries around the world, each bearing a subtle engraving of its origin, literally weaving the planet into its skin. In this way, the statue's very structure would carry a message that humanity's greatest works emerge when we combine our resources and ideas. It could stand as a physical representation of peaceful collaboration, the antithesis of the warfare that toppled the first Colossus. Just as the Eiffel Tower became a symbol of France's industrial prowess and the Statue of Liberty a beacon of welcome, the Colossus could become the emblem of a planet learning to act together. Sustainability would be central to its identity. The Mediterranean climate, with its endless sunlight, offers an opportunity to make the Colossus energy self-sufficient. Photovoltaic panels could be discreetly integrated into the statue's base or even its surface, powering lighting, internal climate control, and visitor facilities. Any excess energy could feed into Rhodes' grid, allowing the monument to give back to its host city. Rainwater harvesting systems built into the structure could irrigate nearby public gardens, making the Colossus not only a cultural landmark but a contributor to local ecology. The statue's illumination could be programmed to shift with the seasons or to commemorate global events. Imagine its bronze skin glowing soft blue on World Oceans Day, or blazing gold to mark the solstice, echoing the sun god Helios whom the original honored. At night, patterns of light could ripple across its surface, simulating the waves of the Aegean below or the constellations above. In this way, the Colossus would remain dynamic, alive, and relevant, its meaning renewed continually through the choices of those who tend it. Inside, the Colossus could house more than observation decks. The hollow spaces within its frame could host exhibits on the history of Rhodes, the original Colossus, ancient Greek culture, and modern sustainable engineering. Interactive displays could connect visitors to other UNESCO World Heritage sites, creating a network of global cultural exchange. Schoolchildren could stand in its heart and touch a screen that links them to classrooms across the world, reminding them that they are part of a shared human story. Cultural symbolism could extend beyond the statue itself. The plaza around the Colossus could be designed as a global forum, with amphitheater-style seating for performances, speeches, and international gatherings. The statue's shadow could sweep across engraved timelines set into the ground, marking key moments in both ancient and modern history. Surrounding gardens could feature plants from each Mediterranean region, reinforcing Rhodes' role as a meeting point of cultures and climates. For the people of Rhodes, the Colossus could be more than a tourist attraction. It could be a source of local pride and economic revitalization. Training programs could prepare residents for roles in its construction, maintenance, and operation, ensuring that the project benefits the community as much as it honors the past. The statue's image could grace local crafts, literature, and art, seeding a new wave of cultural expression. The economic benefits from tourism could fund preservation of Rhodes' other treasures, the medieval Old Town, the Acropolis of Lindos, and the island's archaeological sites, creating a virtuous cycle of heritage care. On the global stage, the Colossus could act as a convening point for conversations about climate change, cultural preservation, and technological ethics. International summits could be held in its shadow, leveraging the monument's symbolism to inspire action. Just as ancient Rhodes leveraged its harbor to control trade, modern Rhodes could use its new icon to influence the flow of ideas. The risk, of course, is that such a project could fall into the trap of being purely ornamental, grand in scale but hollow in purpose. To avoid this, the Colossus must embody the values it claims to represent. That means committing to sustainable materials, fair labor practices, and genuine cross-cultural participation from the outset. The narrative around its construction must be as transparent as the Aegean waters, so that the monument is not seen as an empty gesture but as a living pledge to the ideals it stands for. The original Colossus was said to shine in the morning light, greeting sailors from across the known world. Its modern counterpart could greet not just ships but minds, reminding visitors that human civilization is at its best when it builds bridges, not walls. Standing on the same island that once linked empires, the 21st century Colossus could be a sentinel of shared destiny, its gaze turned outward toward a horizon we all must navigate together. In this reimagining, the Colossus would no longer be the symbol of a single city-state's triumph over its enemies. It would be the symbol of a planet's commitment to itself, a promise in bronze, steel, and light that we can rise together, as surely as the sun rises each morning over the Aegean. A modern Colossus would not simply be a static monument. It would be an engine of cultural and economic transformation. For Rhodes, and for Greece as a whole, the reconstruction of one of the seven wonders of the ancient world would place the island at the center of a global conversation, partly about history, partly about technology, and partly about the possibilities of the future. The economic ripple effects would extend far beyond the shoreline, altering trade, tourism, and diplomacy in ways that few other cultural projects could match. Tourism would be the most immediate and visible impact. Rhodes already draws hundreds of thousands of visitors each year for its medieval old town, sun-drenched beaches, and archaeological sites. The addition of a rebuilt Colossus would elevate the island to the status of a must-visit destination alongside the pyramids of Giza, the Eiffel Tower, and the Taj Mahal. The sheer uniqueness of seeing a wonder lost for over 2 millennia restored to life would create a global surge in interest. Airlines might add direct routes to Rhodes. Cruise lines would adjust itineraries to dock in Mandrake Harbor, and hotels would expand to meet the influx. Economic modeling suggests that a major cultural landmark can increase regional tourism by 20% or more, and in Rhodes' case, this could mean hundreds of millions of euros in additional annual revenue. The trickle-down benefits would touch nearly every sector: restaurants, ferry services, artisan workshops, tour operators, and even local agriculture supplying food for visitors. The Colossus could be surrounded by a cultural complex hosting festivals, concerts, and exhibitions, further increasing the length of tourist stays and encouraging repeat visits. Cultural diplomacy would follow closely behind. In a time when nations often compete for symbolic soft power, hosting a reconstructed wonder of the ancient world would give Greece a platform for projecting influence far beyond its borders. Rhodes could become the site of international cultural summits, heritage conservation conferences, and world art fairs. The Colossus itself could be branded as a neutral ground for dialogue between nations, reinforcing its symbolic role as a monument to cooperation rather than conquest. The statue could also act as a powerful educational tool. Partnerships with UNESCO, the European Union, and universities worldwide could create programs allowing students and scholars to study its design, construction, and symbolic significance. Courses could merge archaeology, engineering, art history, and sustainable design, making Rhodes a hub for interdisciplinary learning. This academic pull would enhance the island's profile as not just a tourist destination, but a place where knowledge is exchanged and preserved. Economically, the project would require careful planning to ensure long-term viability. Maintenance of such a large structure, especially in a marine environment, is costly. Salt air accelerates corrosion, and constant visitor traffic means that both the interior and exterior must be inspected and repaired regularly. If the Colossus is to remain an asset rather than become a liability, a portion of its revenue must be allocated to a dedicated preservation fund. Here, public-private partnerships could play a crucial role, with corporate sponsors underwriting specific features, perhaps a tech company funding the internal digital exhibits, or a renewable energy firm supporting its solar infrastructure. The Colossus image could also become a lucrative brand in its own right. Like the Eiffel Tower or the Sydney Opera House, its silhouette could appear on everything from postage stamps to luxury goods. Licensing agreements could ensure that Rhodes and Greece share in the profits from this branding, further supporting cultural and infrastructure development. The goal would be to keep the monument's image tightly linked to values of heritage, innovation, and sustainability, avoiding the trap of turning it into a mere tourist gimmick. However, economic gain cannot be the only metric of success. If the Colossus is to truly serve as a cultural and diplomatic asset, it must be open, accessible, and inclusive. Ticket prices should allow local residents to enjoy it regularly, and educational programs should reach both the wealthy and those of modest means. The monument's public spaces should be designed to encourage spontaneous gatherings and cultural exchange. ensuring that the Colossus belongs as much to the people of Rhodes as it does to the tourists who come from afar. On the diplomatic front, the Colossus could host international art commissions, with rotating installations from different countries displayed in its base or surrounding plaza. These cultural contributions could be curated around themes of peace, climate action, and human achievement, turning the monument into an evolving gallery that reflects the state of the world. As with the Olympic Games, this would offer nations a non-political arena in which to present their creativity and values. And beyond politics and profit, there is the intangible benefit of pride. For the people of Rhodes, to see the Colossus rise again would be to stand in the continuum of history, descendants of those who once gazed at Helios in his bronze glory. This renewed wonder could inspire a generation of young Greeks to pursue careers in engineering, design, and the arts, knowing that their island can once again produce something the whole world admires. In this vision, the Colossus becomes far more than a static icon. It is a living participant in the global cultural conversation, a catalyst for economic vitality, and a bridge, both literal and symbolic, between nations. Its success would not be measured solely by the number of visitors or the euros in the treasury, but by the depth of the connections it fosters and the inspiration it sparks. No project of such scale and ambition could exist without its detractors, and a modern reconstruction of the Colossus of Rhodes would be no exception. As the concept moved from the realm of imagination into engineering blueprints and feasibility studies, voices of skepticism would inevitably rise, from environmentalists wary of its footprint, from economists questioning its cost, from historians debating the authenticity of recreating something so long vanished. For every supporter envisioning a cultural renaissance, there would be others who saw the effort as misguided or even dangerous. Environmental concerns would top the list. Rhodes is not just an urban hub. It is an island ecosystem, with delicate marine environments surrounding its harbors and a landscape shaped by centuries of human and natural interaction. A massive coastal construction project could disrupt marine life during its building phase. Pile driving for foundations, dredging for stability, increased shipping of materials, all of which could have long-term consequences for biodiversity. Environmental impact assessments would be required by EU and Greek law, and such studies might recommend costly mitigation strategies, artificial reef restoration, temporary exclusion zones for certain species, and the use of quieter, less invasive construction techniques. Then there is the question of climate change. Critics could argue that building a colossal statue at sea level in the 21st century is short-sighted, given rising ocean levels and the increased risk of severe storms. In the age of Helios, Rhodes did not have to contend with a century's worth of climate models predicting coastal shifts. A storm surge today, amplified by warming waters, could inflict catastrophic damage on an exposed monument unless the design incorporated advanced resilience strategies. The Colossus might require a base reinforced to withstand Category 5 hurricanes, seawalls to diffuse wave energy, or the integration of sacrificial structural elements designed to fail without compromising the whole. Economic feasibility would also be contentious. Estimates for a modern Colossus range from several hundred million euros to over $1 billion, depending on its size, materials, and complexity. While tourism revenue could eventually offset some of the cost, the initial investment would require public funding, private sponsorship, or a combination of both. Opponents would question whether those resources might be better spent on infrastructure, healthcare, education, or renewable energy, particularly in a country still mindful of its recent financial crises. The argument would not be without merit. Cultural megaprojects often exceed their budgets and timelines, and the financial burden can linger long after the applause fades. Historians, too, would weigh in, challenging the very premise of reconstruction. The original Colossus has been gone for over 2,000 years. Its design is known only through ancient descriptions, some conflicting, others clearly romanticized. Should a modern interpretation aim for perfect historical accuracy, an impossible goal, or embrace contemporary aesthetics and materials? Purists might contend that any reconstruction would be, at best, a symbolic homage rather than a faithful revival. The Parthenon's surviving columns can be restored because they are still there. The Colossus exists only in imagination and text. Cultural critics could take this further, questioning whether rebuilding ancient wonders risks turning heritage into spectacle. Would a new Colossus serve as a beacon of shared humanity, or merely as an expensive tourist trap? Could it dilute the meaning of the original, transforming a symbol of Rhodes' resilience into a marketing prop for the Instagram age? If the Colossus becomes just another selfie backdrop, critics would argue, its deeper significance will be lost. Political complications are almost inevitable. The Colossus would be a national and international symbol, and as such, vulnerable to politicization. A shift in government could stall funding or redirect the project's purpose. Foreign donors might seek influence over its design in exchange for sponsorship, raising concerns about cultural sovereignty. In extreme cases, geopolitical tensions could even make the Colossus a target, physically or symbolically, in disputes that have nothing to do with Rhodes itself. There is also the sobering fact that monumental structures carry perpetual maintenance obligations. The Statue of Liberty undergoes continuous preservation efforts to protect it from corrosion and structural fatigue, and it is far smaller than the proposed Colossus. Without diligent and well-funded upkeep, the monument could degrade rapidly in the salty Aegean air, becoming an embarrassment rather than a triumph. Yet, for all these risks, history is full of examples where bold visions faced fierce criticism and still reshaped the world. The Eiffel Tower was mocked as a monstrous addition to Paris. The Sydney Opera House went over budget by more than 1,000% and endured years of political controversy before becoming an Australian icon. Even the original Colossus itself, by some accounts, was seen as an audacious gamble for a small island city-state. Supporters of the modern Colossus would counter that every major human achievement is a balance of risk and reward, and that the very discussion of its merits is proof of its potential impact. A project that sparks debate on sustainability, cultural authenticity, and economic vision is already performing a valuable role in civic life. The real question, then, is not whether the risks exist. They always will, but whether the project can address them in ways that strengthen rather than weaken its purpose. A transparent funding model could blunt economic concerns. Advanced coastal engineering could answer environmental and climate threats. A design process involving historians, archaeologists, artists, and engineers from around the world could preserve cultural authenticity while embracing modern creativity. In the end, the Colossus would succeed or fail not in the shipyards or foundries where it is forged, but in the minds of the people it seeks to inspire. If it rises as an empty shell, critics will be proven right. But if it stands as a living testament to cooperation, innovation, and the enduring human drive to build something greater than ourselves, then the risks will not have been in vain. Every era has its monument, the structure or symbol that encapsulates its ambitions, fears, and ideals. For the Mycenaeans, it was their fortified citadels. For the Romans, their aqueducts and amphitheaters. For the Renaissance, soaring cathedrals that seemed to defy gravity. In our own time, what would such a monument be? Would it be something entirely digital, existing only in pixels and code? Or could it still be something forged from stone and steel, standing against wind and sea? The Colossus of Rhodes, if rebuilt, might be our answer. The act of rebuilding would not simply be a nod to the past. It would be a declaration about the present. In an age that moves at the speed of data, where most of what we create exists in fleeting screens, choosing to construct a physical wonder is a conscious return to permanence. It says we believe in leaving behind something tangible, something future generations can walk beneath and touch. The Colossus could be a symbol of human continuity. A link between the hands that shaped bronze in antiquity and the hands that mold titanium and carbon fiber today. But daring to build would mean daring to imagine not only the monument itself, but the meaning it must carry. The original Colossus was born from triumph, Rhodes' victory over Demetrius Poliorcetes, and it stood as a statement of defiance and unity. A modern Colossus could not simply be a monument to military success. The values of our time demand something broader, something inclusive. It could stand for global cooperation, for the shared stewardship of the planet, for the merging of cultural heritage with scientific progress. Such symbolism would not emerge automatically. It would have to be deliberately woven into every phase of the project. From the selection of materials to the energy sources powering its lights, from the transparency of its funding to the accessibility of its design, the Colossus would have to be a living embodiment of the ideals it claims to represent. In this way, its very construction could become a form of diplomacy, drawing together architects from Japan, engineers from Germany, environmental scientists from Australia, and artists from across the Mediterranean. There is power in the act of building itself. The world is often shaped not by words alone, but by the things we choose to make real. The Great Wall of China, the pyramids of Giza, the International Space Station, all began as visions, derided by some, championed by others, until they took shape against the odds. If Rhodes dares to build, the process will test not only engineering capacity, but also political will and public faith. Such a project must outlast election cycles, economic downturns, and shifts in popular opinion. It must be rooted in a vision larger than any one administration, company, or generation. The Colossus would also invite us to rethink what it means to interact with history. Too often, we approach the past as though it were a museum exhibit, frozen behind glass, untouchable. But if we dare to rebuild, we are engaging with history as a dialogue, not a display. We are asking, what can we carry forward? What deserves to be reimagined? And how can we honor the spirit of an ancient achievement without reducing it to mere replication? Of course, to dare is to accept the possibility of failure. The project could stumble under financial strain, technical setbacks, or political disputes. It could be met with international criticism, dismissed as vanity, or overshadowed by global crises. But the very act of attempting it would signal a refusal to accept that the era of great monuments is over. It would assert that humanity can still gather its resources, creativity, and ambition to build something extraordinary. Perhaps the most compelling reason to build is the legacy it could leave, not just in steel and stone, but in minds and hearts. A child from Rhodes could grow up seeing the Colossus on the horizon every day, knowing that their community brought the impossible into being. A visitor from across the world could stand beneath its towering frame and feel, if only for a moment, that humanity's past, present, and future are all connected in the same arc of ambition. The Colossus would not change the world overnight, but it would change the way we think about our place in it. It would remind us that we are capable of creating beauty and meaning at a scale that transcends the individual, that we can still stand together to make something so vast it humbles us, and so enduring it outlives us. If we dare to build, we will be measured not only by the monument that rises in the harbor, but by the unity, ingenuity, and courage it took to place it there. And perhaps, in some distant century, when our descendants sail into Rhodes and gaze up at the sunlit figure on the shore, they will know that in our time, against all challenges, we chose to leave them a wonder. In the quiet hours before dawn, Rhodes lies still. The harbor's waters reflect the stars in trembling silver, and the air smells faintly of salt and the whisper of the open sea. It is here, in this half-light, that one can almost imagine it. The shadow of a colossal figure standing guard at the harbor's edge, the faint gleam of bronze catching the first hint of morning sun. For over 2 millennia, that vision has lived only in the imagination, a ghostly silhouette conjured from scraps of history and the longing of generations. Yet the question lingers, could we bring it back? The Colossus of Rhodes is more than a lost monument. It is a story, one that belongs equally to history and to hope. Its destruction was not just the collapse of metal and stone. It was the loss of a chapter in humanity's shared narrative. To rebuild it would not be to erase that loss, but to write a new chapter, one that bridges the gulf between what was and what might be. Such an act would say to the world, we remember, and we choose to continue. But in truth, the most powerful legacy of the Colossus is not the image of a giant by the sea. It is the idea that humanity is capable of thinking and building beyond necessity. The ancient Rhodians did not need their Colossus to survive. They built it because they wanted to create something magnificent, something that proclaimed their place in the world. That desire, to make something not because it is required, but because it is beautiful, symbolic, and enduring, is one of the rarest and most defining qualities of our species. If we were to rebuild the Colossus today, it would not stand only for Rhodes. It would stand for the willingness to reach across centuries, to bring the distant past into conversation with the present. It would stand for the idea that the modern world, for all its speed and fragility, still has the patience and skill to create something monumental. And it would stand as a reminder that the wonders we inherit are not limited to those left to us. They can also be the ones we choose to make. There will always be those who argue that some giants are best left in legend, that the past should remain untouched. And perhaps they are right, in part. The Colossus that once stood in Rhodes will never exist again exactly as it was. Its materials have been scattered, its builders long gone, its original gaze lost to the ages. But in place of an exact replica, we could create a new guardian of the harbor, one that speaks not only to what Rhodes was, but to what the world can be. Whether the Colossus rises again will depend not on technology or resources alone, but on the strength of collective imagination. For the decision to rebuild is, at its heart, an act of belief. Belief that beauty matters, that history can be honored through action, and that in a world often divided, a single figure standing tall could still inspire unity. The light of the Colossus has been gone for more than 2,000 years, but light is never truly lost. It waits, patient, for something to kindle it again. If the day comes when the figure of Helios stands once more beside the sea, torch or crown ablaze with the brilliance of a new dawn, it will not simply be a return of what was. It will be a beginning, and the light that returns will be ours to keep.